Welcome back, everyone. My guest today, James McQuiggan, has worn a ton of different hats in the industry. Host of the Simply Secured podcast, he's also a CISO advisor, social engineering awareness expert, general cybersecurity edutainer, and dad joke expert extraordinaire. Hey, everybody. Quick message before we get going today. Don't forget to click the like, click the subscribe, and ring the bell if you want to get notified when new episodes drop. Really helps us out here at the channel, helps us spread our message out to a broader audience. So thanks in advance for your support. Let's roll into today's show. Welcome to Shop Talk. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, pleasure's all mine. Excited to be here.
I was, when did we meet? It was October, I think we met in person.
Simply CyberCon.
Simply CyberCon, yep. And I was sort of, this idea of starting up this kind of a podcast was germinating at the time. And I was definitely on the lookout for people that had interesting stories, interesting backstories. I think I'd been there all of about 6.5 minutes when I bumped into you.
Yep.
And
it was in the lobby of the hotel.
Yep. And I said, you know what? This guy's got an interesting story to tell. So you've obviously got quite the resume. You've done a lot of different things in the industry. I want to start. I like to dig into like the backstory and
Sure.
why people are doing what they're doing and how they got there. Because I think there's no linear paths in security. You know, everybody's coming from somewhere different.
Yep.
They bring a different set of skills and a different perspective. So I'd like to back way up and ask you how you got into technology, how you got into security, and just sort of the Reader's Digest version of your arc, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. I was always interested in technology. I was always interested in how things worked. I've been told by my parents that I took the TV apart, and this was a tube TV way back in the 70s, so I'm already dating myself.
The real question is, did you put it back together?
Yeah, there were a couple of screws left over. My dad, I think, put it back together. My parents were freaked out because I figured out how to get the back of the TV off and was messing around with some of the stuff. But I was always interested in technology. When computers, the Commodore VIC-20, the Commodore 64, I had an IBM, I had a PCXT computer, 8086, when I was in the late 80s, early 90s. And I was always interested in technology. And at the time in high school, that's how far back we're going, there was computers, which back then for me, a lot of it was programming. And I wasn't very much a programmer. I was more of like hands-on. I liked the technology. I could enter in the code that you'd get from Byte magazine. If you know, you know. But being in high school, one of the other passions and one of the other things that I discovered was theater. Still staying with the technology, though. I was very much the lighting guy, the sound guy. I was the AV guy in high school. And I decided to follow that career, that path in theater. Went to college, came down to I was in Canada at the time. Then we ended up moving to Florida, where we still are. And I went to, and I studied theater for a number of years and then worked professionally for about 6. For me, a lot of it was all the technical aspects, the lighting, the sound. I was very much into stage management, which ironically is kind of like the program manager, project manager for the show, making sure everybody's there, everybody's doing their job on time, troubleshooting any issues that come up, overseeing essentially the run of the show from casting to closing. And I loved it. I truly enjoyed that. Was a passion. However, the lifestyle, the late nights, the weekends, the long days, while exciting and a lot of fun, I knew it wasn't going to be something I wanted to have a family, get married, have kids with. And so I decided to get back into computers. And in the late 90s, I went and got my A+ certification. Still grandfathered in. That was back in that was the A+ with DOS and Windows way back in the day. And I worked at a help desk for 3 years, which I still will, die on a hill that, everybody should start at a help desk. I did help desk for about 3 years, worked my way up from the desk to the mentor, level 2, became manager. And then I started working at Siemens. And that was very important in my career because I spent 18 years there and got to do a lot of different roles, everything from building databases, database administration, to programming, to building computer systems and servers, network architecture, network programming. I taught myself how to configure a Cisco PIX, the router and the switch iOS configurations, and building VPNs, doing NAT traversals, all that fun stuff. And that led into doing compliance with NERC CIP in the electricity region, the North American Electric Reliability, Critical Infrastructure Protection Standards and Guidelines, because I was handling a lot of that for the department I worked in with all the 200, 300 plus remote sites that we were connected to. Being a part of Siemens Energy, we had gas turbines that we sold, and one of the services essentially was kind of like OnStar. We would monitor the gas turbine, and I was responsible for all the network configuration of getting that data back to Siemens. But getting into the compliance aspect then kind of caught the eye of our product security officer and our corporate security officer, and so they wanted to audit our systems to make sure they were really secure, and I'm like, sure. And so we ended up traveling around the U.S., visiting a handful of our sites. And in one morning at breakfast, I'm with the two of them, and they turn to me and say, have you thought about getting your CISSP? I said, my CIA what? And that pretty well, that was a big change, because then I spent the next 6 months studying for my CISSP. I had the years of experience in networking and the telecommunications risk management stuff. And I took my CISSP and passed it in October of 2008. Within 2 years, I was working for our corporate security officer doing NERC compliance for entire Siemens Energy in North America. But eventually what came about was revitalizing our security awareness program, where I did phishing, I ran an ambassador program, and I was doing security awareness for the North American region. And that kind of struck something with me where I really enjoyed the opportunity to be able to educate people, share with them the importance of cybersecurity. Back then we were talking about phishing. This is 2010, 12. I was trying to get a phishing program going long before I knew about KnowBe4. But getting a phishing program going, I had an ambassador program, champion program going, doing awareness along with the compliance and other tasks. But I really discovered how much I loved security awareness, which eventually led me to teaching post-secondary, college, and now university, teaching cyber threat intelligence. So I ended up leaving Siemens in 2019 to go work at KnowBe4 as at that time, security awareness advocate, then became a CISO advisor, which was a fantastic role, doing thought leadership at webinars, podcasts, conferences, articles, blogs, whatever, all relating to, cybersecurity, focused on social engineering, the human aspects of cybersecurity and what we're doing and everything else. Sadly, though, in January of this year, my position was moved. They relocated it out to Singapore for the Asia market. And so since then, I've now been on my own and started up my own LLC called Apparent Security.
Is this something you've been toying with for a long time and just were like waiting for the right opportunity to kind of come up? Or is this something that to fill, because of the situation, you decided to do this?
A little of both. Having conversations with people in my network. There were several options coming out of the gate. One, try to go find another job, just what I was doing with another security vendor or something similar. Get into training, maybe come up with training, developing courseware. I'm going to be developing a workshop for a training company here in a little bit on deepfakes, how to do a workshop on creating your own deepfakes and kind of thing. So there's been like an education path, continuing to teach, getting back in with another corporation, trying to find another kind of job, or just maybe trying to do it on my own where I'm doing presentations, I get paid to go and speak, doing the workshops, and then also at the same time have a book that can be leveraged, because that goes a long way. If If you're going to
Mm-hmm.
a conference and they can't pay you for speaking, well, maybe it's like, all right, we'll buy up a series, 100 copies of the book, and then I can come and sign them, that kind of a thing. And I know that's been successful for folks. Or going to teach workshops. If you can develop and put together a good program that people are interested in learning more about, then you have that, and then people will be take the workshop, and then you can make money that way as well. And then doing some either fractional type CISO work or other cybersecurity work, helping out organizations on a contract level. It doesn't have to be 40 hours a week with one particular client. It could be 20 hours a month or whatever, and having multiple clients and having those multiple streams of revenue. So it's been a juggling act so far. Like I said, I haven't stopped, but probably in the next couple of months, we'll be certainly looking at, okay, let's lock something down on where I'm going to go, what am I going to focus on, and then push forward with that. Still working on it, but kind of getting things to fall into place. But at the same time, I'm not feeling overly rushed where it's like, oh my God, I got to get a job, I got to get back out working. With the experience over the years and everything else, and the network connections, it's like, okay, I had a very good friend of mine for years. He would always say, plan your work and work your plan. And so for me right now, this is a whole lot of planning my work, planning what I want to do. And then in the next couple months, looking at executing on that and moving forward. That's the next phase.
So in addition to everything else you've been doing, you're gonna find time to write a book as well. Is that what I picked up on? That
try to, yeah.
That's getting added to the plate.
Yeah,
you're not going to be bored.
Ironically, I've been documenting this whole process, and I know for so many people, being involved in a RIF, a reduction in force, having PE, position elimination, whatever, laid off, whatever it may be. For me, it was a rather unique experience because A, I didn't expect it. And B, it was sort of like somebody died and I was involved in a really bad breakup with a significant other where it's total cutoff, no more connections, no access to any of the data that you've had for 6 years or any of the information or any of the websites, that kind of thing. And then it's like it's a breakup after that. And it's like, okay, all right. Can't talk to them anymore, even though you may want to, but it's like, all right, can't talk to them. And so you go through those stages of grief where it's shock. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I lost my job. Well, I'm going to fight this, to it's like, okay, gotta, but maybe if I did X, Y, and Z or had done X, Y, and Z, maybe I wouldn't have gotten had my position eliminated. And then it eventually gets to a level of acceptance where, okay, this is what happened. It was a business decision. It was nothing against me. It happened to me, but it wasn't targeted to me. It was just my position was eliminated. Okay, move on. But I've been documenting a lot of what the emotions that you would feel going through that. And so that's kind of one of the things I want to put together is to have something that when I see somebody on LinkedIn saying their position was eliminated, I can go, here's a little, ebook of sorts that, it'll take you 20 minutes to read of this is what you can expect. This is what you're going to feel, and it's okay. As it was a unique chapter for me, it'll be a unique chapter for a lot of other people as well that may have never been through it, or maybe it's their fifth time or second time or 10th time. But just to kind of have way to give back. I've always considered myself someone that likes to give back to the community when I've received so much through support, through messages and everything else. And so just kind of another way to be able to return the favor, passing it forward essentially.
Well, I think that's huge. I mean, I think that the way you described that, I mean, that hits pretty hard, that it's likening it to a breakup or, a death of an associate or friend. I mean, it's, a lot of people don't know what to do in that situation. And so having a resource that says, you're going to survive this. There are ways to get through this. And here are some practical steps. Because we can all encourage people on LinkedIn and be like, hey man, it'll be fine. You'll find a new role. Yeah, exactly. But instead saying, you're going to need some things and here's what I can give you right now. I think that's really, really cool that you're going to be doing that. The other thing that is underestimated by a lot of people is the value in almost building a career around the expectation that you may need that, that contingency plan at some point.
Right.
The power of networking, the power of, maintaining positive relationships. I tell people all the time, don't burn a bridge, just because you can't stand doing a job. Do it the best you can and find something that you want to do instead, but try to leave on good terms, because especially in the security community, and if you get into a niche, it is small. You're going to run into the same people. People are going to know each other, and you never know who that next person is that may be the deciding factor in a new opportunity or prevent you from a new opportunity.
Right.
So yeah, the
You
power of
never know who you
networking
meet
is
today
huge.
that'll get you a job the next day.
That is true. That is true. Because it is always, what is it? Not what you know, it's who you know. I like to think it's a portion is what you know, but who you know can't hurt.
It's who you know who knows you, or it's who you know that who knows what you know and what you're capable of.
That's a
That
lot of
goes a long
layers.
way. Yeah.
Yeah.
As well, it's deep, I know, but when you've got connections with people and they're like, oh yeah, no, we hung out at the conference, we had a couple drinks, he's a great guy. And it's like, well, have you seen what kind of work they've done or anything like that?
Exactly.
When you've got that connection with somebody and you've seen them do presentations or you've seen them deliver workshops or webinars, you can go, no, they're really good at doing presentations. They're really good at taking a concept, breaking it down, making it easy to understand, and then passing it along. Yes, that person would be amazing as X.
Right.
That kind of thing. Those are the network connections you want. It's one thing to connect with them on LinkedIn. It's another to hang out with them at an event and really get to know them. And not like best friends get to know them, but get to know them. And even then, those closest ones may not be the ones that do get you the job. It could be somebody that you met 10, 15 years ago in another job that heard about what's going on and goes, hey, dude, so.
That's definitely a skill that has to be reinforced in the up and coming generation, because I think that there's a lot of difficulty around making those person to person connections and really putting yourself out there, because, you have to have that whole fear of rejection thing and feel awkward and you don't know what to say. And, we've all done it. We all still probably feel it to some degree or another meeting a new person. And those are the kind of things that you can't impress upon someone enough. You also mentioned something else that I am a huge proponent of, which is starting at the help desk. I think that we see so many times in cybersecurity, and particularly in the last few years, as kind of the cybersecurity boom has occurred, if you want to call it that. There's a lot of interest in getting into the field. There's a lot of demand. There's a lot of need for skilled cybersecurity professionals. But I think what is missed sometimes is the fact that, cybersecurity, there are entry-level cybersecurity jobs, but they are not entry-level technology jobs. There has to be a bit of foundational experience in that, building networks, working the help desk, seeing how things break. That's so important in really understanding security at a fundamental level.
Yep.
I'm glad to see I'm not alone in that that messaging, because I beat on that drum all the time. I'm like, go get a help desk job. That's the first step, if you want to get into cybersecurity.
Yeah, I was told when I got my CISSP way back in 2008, and somebody turning to me, somebody who was a leader in the industry, turning to me and goes, "You're coming in at a great time. You're joining the cybersecurity industry at a fantastic time, a great time, a growing time." And it's pretty well anything. It's the same statement I make to people today when I meet them. You're coming in at a very exciting time, a very appropriate time, because we need more security people, even though it's so challenging to get into the role. But it still holds true. We're a young, our industry is young. It's, it's only really, you think about it, 40 years, maybe, if that, 45, maybe 50. But compared to other industries and things that are out there, we're relatively young and continually growing and changing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I was going to say, you just said it, but I was going to say that somebody told me the exact same thing when I got my CISSP. They were like, "Oh, what a great time to get that. The industry's ripe for more professionals." And We're going to be saying that for as long as we're talking about social engineering. You know that.
Yeah, right.
That's not going away.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on why social engineering just won't die? It isn't going away. Why is it so effective? Why is it that it's a perennial problem for across industries?
You can go all the way back to Adam and Eve. No,
We're going to need a
take
little
a
more
bite of the
time.
apple. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
social engineering has evolved so much over the centuries, over the decades, over the last 20 years. We as humans are very trusting, for the most part. We are helpful people. A lot of it comes down to the fact that social engineers, scammers are constantly evolving their game. That once we learn one technique, they're already learning the next. Years ago, a lot of it came down to, when we look at phishing emails, we always said check the spelling and check the grammar. That was always a telltale sign. Back in the day, it was like, oh, if your name's included with like 6 or 7 other people that have the same first letter or the same first letter of your last name, that's probably going to be a spam email. And we would give people the signs to look at of what, a phishing email would look like. And I think back then we kind of missed it as well, because cyber criminals continually evolve and improve. I mean, now with large language models, they're able to craft perfectly well-written, properly spelled emails in whatever language they need. English, Spanish, Italian, French, German, Estonian, Japanese, Chinese, whatever. They can do it in any kind of language, and it's very easy to do that. They've evolved, they've leveled up, and so now we have to make sure that we, as people, do the same. We get the emails that are coming in, and it's written, there's not a link in there. And what they're trying to do is trying to build that rapport. They're leveling up their game and going after our emotions as people, our curiosity, fear, urgency, and relying on those emotions to get us to react. And essentially, there's a concept called the OODA loop, observe, orient, detect, and act. And essentially, they just want us to see something and immediately react to it, take action, versus looking at it, considering the situation, thinking about what decision to make, and then acting upon it. And so as the cyber criminals and scammers continue to evolve, we as people have to be more aware. And nowadays, for me, I like to kind of align it with the fact that at my home, I have one of those video camera doorbells, and I think a lot of people do too. Nowadays, when my doorbell rings, years ago, the doorbell would ring and we were all excited. Oh, who's at the door? Got to go see at the door. Got to find out, go see who's at the door. Someone's come to visit me. Nowadays, when the doorbell rings, if I'm not expecting Amazon or the pizza guy or a friend to come over, I'm opening up the app on my phone to see who's at the door. I'm taking an extra moment to see who it is, because I don't want to go to the door if it's somebody with a clipboard trying to sell me something or solicit something in my neighborhood. And so I will take the extra moment to look at the app to see who's at my front door. The same thing needs to apply with our emails. If we're not expecting the email, if the email comes in, it sounds kind of strange or unusual, take a moment to look at the email, see if you can verify who it's coming from if you're not expecting it. If it is somebody you know and it does seem kind of unusual that they sent it because they didn't say they were going to send it or you had no idea, and it's very easy to reach out through a text message going, hey, just verifying you sent this to me. Okay, great, cool, thanks. And the reason that it's so important is because of the fact that everybody in the organization that has an email address has a key to the front door for that organization, the electronic front door. And they are cyber criminals and scammers are loving the fact that I can get right by all the technology. I don't need an exploit to get by the firewall or whatever. I can just go right after somebody's email address, send them an email and get them to click on a link. And now they've opened the door for me and I go walking in. And they're getting more and more sophisticated by getting email addresses that are with known organizations, the business email compromise, where they get a valid email address, it's recognized, it's certified, So now when it comes in, it's not getting flagged by, your mail servers or your mail gateways, your email gateways that are looking for, non-certified, where they're not, the organization isn't using things like DKIM or SPF, Sender Policy Framework. And essentially, by leveraging an organization that has all that, and they get into there, now they can send an email off to another customer or make it appear like it's part of a reply or a forward or whatever. And so again, just trying to add more to that believability, but it's just a matter of sitting there and going, am I expecting the email? Is the person asking me to do something strange or unusual, or I have an emotional reaction to it? Take that extra moment and just kind of go, okay, is this something I need to click on? Can I verify it?
You mentioned that kind of the historical context too, where we're not just fighting a technology fight. This is human nature. The bias towards trust, the bias towards, helping each other out, that's preyed upon all the time. It's either that fear of consequence, the fear of missing out, or the fear of a negative consequence for somebody else that spurs action in the moment. And,
right.
We see in transportation all the time, there's the time constraints as well, because email and communication is coming in so fast that it has to be handled in near real time, or, you may miss out on a load. You may, something's going to cost money. Right. And so convincing people to take that moment, take a beat, slow down, and really dig into, is this legitimate? Is this not legitimate? I think that's where your organizational culture has to be one that supports the people raising their hand and saying, hey, this smells funny. Let's look at this a little bit more. Smells fishy, as it were. See, I can pull out a few of these. With AI, we hear AI dash everything, right? So it's AI now is kind of part of every conversation. But I think in the context of social engineering, like you said, immediate translation into first language type quality of these things is a game changer. And then you get into territory like deepfakes. That's something, a completely fake person who looks just like someone that's new. That's like cloak and dagger disguise stuff back in the day. You had to have some resources behind you to do that.
Yeah.
And now anybody with a couple dollars and a subscription can do that.
Yep.
Where do you think that is on both the hype curve and on its own and on a real trajectory? Because I know everybody's really nervous about deep fakes. What's your opinion on the threat level there and where that is headed?
Yeah, I mean, I've been messing around with deep fakes and doing them in presentations for the last couple of years now. And a lot of the time I do it just to kind of demonstrate, look, this took me 10 minutes to do this. Using a couple services and finding a YouTube video of the person. Actually, it was interesting. A couple weekends ago, I vibe coded using Claude Code and created my own, what I call fake maker, where I just give it the YouTube link. I give it the script of what I want it to say, and leveraging a couple of API calls out to a couple services, I create a deep fake video in less than 4 minutes.
That's terrifying on certain levels.
But what that is a set video. So I would need to put a series of those together with anticipation of a conversation, and then leverage something like OBS or something else to have like a video chat with somebody.
Right.
But with a little more money, you can do live face swaps. I can connect through Zoom, Teams, or any of the other video chat systems, run software on a powerful laptop or even a desktop machine with a high-end graphics card, and I can swap out my whole face to be whoever I want, whether, it be the CEO, the CFO, or whatever, but then distort it and then make my voice sound weird, because I can do real-time voice changing as well. In essence, pretend to do a video chat with the person, but have it break up, have it disconnect, unfortunately, and then respond with a text. All I'm looking for is to do it long enough for the person to see that it's me pretending to be whoever, whoever in authority over them. And then once I connect, they have that rapport built, and now I start texting saying, and I'm not texting from a number they know. They may not have the CFO's number, but if they do, it can be very easily to social engineer them to kind of say, you know, I just lost my phone. I'm on my wife's. I'm on a extra phone that I've backup phone or whatever, and carry on the conversation after building that rapport. It could start with a text message, but essentially, with the ability of technology, it's leveling up again. But it's also, and this is kind of the funny thing, is what's old is new again. We think back, not even 10 years, go back like 6 or 7, and the hot thing was text messages or emails from your boss asking you to buy Apple gift cards or Amazon gift cards or whatever else. But now they're using the deep fakes, the audio and the video, because they may do it through a phone call and say, hey, look, I'm with a client. We want to get them some gift cards. We want to do this, or tweak it up a bit to be where it's like, we haven't paid them the last 2 invoices. We need to pay them now. Here's the new information, you know, and look to get that out. And there was a very sophisticated one a couple of years ago, and that one's been kind of talked a lot about, where you had somebody in Hong Kong where, you know, in their culture, you know, authority is very well respected. And if they say jump, it's, you know, how high. But essentially, they were asked to transfer money. They jumped, started through a chat. Then it went to a video call with the CFO, the CEO, and several board members. And they had deep faked all of them. Distorted it, made it seem like it was a bad connection, poor internet, but just enough to build that rapport, build that convincingly. And then once they dropped the call, they continued on going, all right, this is where you got to send the money, and $25 million goes out the door. And we've had other instances where through deepfake audio, where you only need 10 seconds of somebody's voice recording to be able to generate a deepfake audio. But through social media, you know, if you've got kids or family members or even executives, people in your organization, and they're out there publicly on YouTube or podcasts or webinars, and their audio is out there, and it's very easy to be able to create it. I'm I recognize that, there's plenty of me out there that people could use my audio to try to pretend to call my family members or whatever and try and trick them. But one of the things that I've shared with my family and friends is to go, we're not going to worry about code words because you're not going to remember it. But you ask me a question that only I would know that's not online. And that line of questioning, and only ask me 1 or 2 questions, because if the cyber criminals don't know it, they have my audio, but they can't find the information fast enough, can't respond quick enough, then they know they got to hang up because the scam's up, because people know that, it's not really that person. So for me, the questioning, and it's almost a little bit of cynicism, when we're seeing things online, hearing things online, it's a matter of trusting the source. And if you're not sure of the source, then there's reason to be a little skeptical.
Well, it's almost like we're having to adopt zero trust in our person-to-person relationships. And that's kind of a frustrating state of affairs when, if you call me, and like today when you called into the podcast, like, I never even thought to verify, is this really James? You know what I mean? And that's really the way. Could be. You haven't asked me for anything. No Apple gift cards have come up yet. So, but and that's really the case. Is kind of number one, trusting your gut a little bit. It really comes down to trusting your gut. If something seems off, you've got to verify. You've got to ask. And I like what you said, because I have the same feeling about code words. It's like, how many of us are going to forget a code word that we agreed on a year and a half ago? You know what I mean?
Especially under duress. Yeah.
Yeah. So, asking something that only that person is going to know, or there's no way that someone who only had online information, that's such a positive, positive way to do that. Everybody I talk to, I'm curious what the thought process is on, we're seeing the iterations with every flavor of chatbot that comes out. Every model that gets released is getting incrementally better. Some of them are getting exponentially better. At coding, at other tasks. We saw OpenClaw recently, where it was really operationalizing and turning it into an interactive tool in the environment. To me, all of these things I look at it all through a security lens, and I'm like, this is a bad situation. I can see the positives down the road, some of these things they're going to be benefits. But I think right now we are rushing headlong into a security situation, with the level of trust that people are giving to some of these LLMs and the level of access they're giving into their environments without really understanding the technology yet. And I'm always curious, what are your thoughts on how we can help to put some guardrails around the adoption of AI tools in, we'll focus on an enterprise environment and the education piece around that, because personally, people are trying these tools, they're trying all sorts of stuff. It's very different in a corporate environment, very different when you start deploying that stuff as a bring your own LLM kind of model that we see sometimes. What do you think is the trick to putting some guardrails around the AI risk?
Yeah, humans will always find a way. And if you turn to them and go, thou shalt not use any large language model, people are going to be like, oh, yeah, hold my beer.
Yeah,
And
watch me.
they will basically use their phone or take work, that they want to run through a large language model to ask it questions and take it home and upload it there. Like security, the stigma of Department of No, it's a matter of, it should be a department of, okay, but let's look at this, let's think about this, or how about this? I think education is extremely important, and you've got developers. It's an opportunity for developers to be a lot more efficient with their work. I had a conversation with somebody the other week regarding vibe coding, because the application I created from start to finish in about 3 hours was a application for the chapter that I'm involved with, the ISC2 Central Florida chapter that I'm involved with here, where I live. Been involved with them for the last 9 years. Anyway, we have a printer and we have a little Linux machine that it connects to the internet. And when we have people that show up for our events, they've registered ahead of time, and we have a whole check-in process where we check in through the app, and then it prints up a name tag for them. And the application we were using was coded by one of the members who isn't with us, isn't part of the chapter anymore. And it worked great. It was a great little program, worked great. But then it stopped working, and we were having a problem. We figured it was something with the API, and I'm thinking, well, I could sit here and go through all the code and try to figure it out. I mean, I know enough about coding to be dangerous to go through and look at certain things. And I was like, let me see if I can put something together. And being able to vibe code what the requirements were, what the inputs were, what outputs I wanted, made it very easy to build this application, because coming from an understanding the program mindset, from somebody that doesn't know anything about programming, going in and asking, that would be interesting to see, and that could be dangerous. But and having a conversation with another colleague who had been vibe coding, also a programmer, it made things a lot easier for them. They still had to go through, and there was a couple hiccups with the application, and I had to go in and look at the code. But because I knew what I was looking for in the code, I was able to find, oh, that's the problem, and I was able to fix it manually. I did kick it back to Claude Code and go, okay, there was this error. This is what I found. This is how I corrected it. And it was like, oh, great. For me, like I said, it's certainly something that allows us to be more efficient if we have an understanding of the concepts behind it. We look at large language models generating images, artwork, logos, whatever. My daughter's a graphic designer, and she detests using AI at all, which is rather interesting. But when it comes to the graphic design elements, I bet if I had her sit down and said, all right, you tell it what you want it to do and get as specific as you want, and see how it turns out. And I have a feeling, if she did, she has no desire. I have a feeling that it would give her a much better result than if I just tried to put something in to say, I want a logo of a lighthouse with these colors and so forth. But she could go in and say, want a logo of a lighthouse with a stripe, have it lit up, have a gradient background in a hexagon shape going from, upper left, lower right. Again, it's all dependent on how you prompt it. But it's something that AI is giving us an opportunity to be a lot more efficient with what we're doing. I use Claude, I use Gemini, a little bit of ChatGPT for daily work, for research, for going through brainstorming ideas. Yes, I can write a blog. Yes, I can write an article. Yes, I can write a book. But I'm using it more for finding information for me a lot quicker than it would be trying to use other search engines and get that information there and then going through and verifying it. It's not just a matter of going, hey, great, I got the info, and then running off with it. It's like, no, you've still got to go through, verify, validate, and then rewrite it or put it in your words rather than what it's giving you. But overall, whether we are vibe coding, whether we're creating images, making videos or whatever, using avatars to create our own training videos or whatever, AI is certainly something that is there for good. It's not going anywhere, but it allows us to be more efficient and free up more time for other tasks or other work, while people are sitting there worried that, oh no, and I hate the saying of, AI isn't going to take your job. Somebody who knows AI is going to take your job. And I think what we need to get is to a point where everybody understands and knows about AI. You look back, where are we? 2026, you look back 40 years to the mid 80s. And not a lot of people had home computers. Home computers were just starting to take off. But it wasn't to the point where everybody had to learn how to use a computer, whether you're in kindergarten to whether you're 85, 90 years old. Didn't need to worry about computers. Fast forward into the 2000s and everybody's by the 2000 teens, everybody's pretty well on social media and they're using it. And AI is kind of the same thing. You're going to have people that are going to push back and go, nope, not going to do it. Those are on your outliers. But I think as a whole, society is going to be using AI, whether large language models or it's integrated into applications or software or features in your home or whatever it may be. But AI is going to be integrated, and it's a matter of being able to understand how to use it. Because if you start adopting it now and learning how to use it and verify it and everything else, use it properly, then you're going to be a lot better off. Because I know, thinking back to the 80s, people that were like, nope, not going to use that computer, don't need it, they eventually either did or they, ended up leaving or going into something else completely different. But computers ended up still coming back around.
Mm-hmm. I think the area that I'm concerned about when it comes, because I agree, you can take a skilled coder and software developer with some experience, and it's a force multiplier for them. They can, if they're like, I don't remember how to do this thing, and then you feed it in and it just spits it out, and you tweak it and make it, correct the errors you find, whatever. The problem is we're going to have issues, maybe not in the next 2 to 4 to 5 years, but we're going to have issues with the pipeline of developers learning these skills if they're coming in and they're vibe coding their way to success, because they're not going to get that experience. They're not going to get those insights. And I think that's my concern is, if you know how to use it and you already understand the subject matter, you can use it as a tool. You can do research with it, like you mentioned. You can flesh out sources that have been found and do deep research, and that's a force multiplier. But if you don't know how to do that well already and have some experience, then I think we're going to run into a bit of a choke point in the skill set that people have in some of these industries. And I guess that's my concern. Take the security out of it. Take the let's assume that we can do security around it, which we're learning. there'll be growing pains, as with any new technology, but we're learning it. How do we get around that choke point? How do you see that? Are we going to make people code manually, like doing long division in school, even though there's a calculator kind of a thing?
You just kind of hit it on the head there. With math nowadays, I remember, and I'm kind of telling another story here, but, flashing back to my first job, working at a store, doing math in my head, because back then people were paying with cash pretty well a lot of the time. You know, the bill rings up and it's $18.96. They hand me a 20. Already in my head, I know, oh, it's $1.04. Granted, you had the cash register and it could tell you $1.04, but I was already doing math in my head. Nowadays, you go into the supermarket and the cash register's not working, or the kid doesn't know how to make change. They're pulling out their phone, and that has been lost. That skill has been lost. And I think, sadly, what's going to happen is it's going to be that we're going to rely so much on the technology to do that for us that when there's a problem, it's either going to be somebody that's either sat down and really learned how to do that. So while today we might have, I'm going to make a number up, we might have 100,000 programmers. It may get to the point where, like you're saying, with that choke point, where people are creating these applications because the AI is just going to get better and better and better, and the Claude codes and everything else are just going to get better and better, that something doesn't work, you tell it something doesn't work, and it goes through and it goes, oh, or you give it the error message. Because I know for me, when troubleshooting on some of these applications that I've made, I'm implementing it on the system. Sometimes I can figure it out, but other times it's like, what the heck is that? I paste it into the large language model and go, this is the error I got. And it goes, oh, this is why, and goes boom, boom, boom. And then I go back and I troubleshoot. So I know enough to be dangerous, but not to sit there and go through lines and lines and lines of code when I can just turn to the large language model and talk to it naturally saying it doesn't work. And I think that skill will eventually go away. You look at, making cars. Years ago it was assembly lines and unions and it was all people. Nowadays, people are only there for quality control. Everything's done with robots. And I think that's going to be a similar case. It may not be next year, it may not be 5 years, it could be 10 years or 15 years from now. Who knows how much further we'll be along from a developer standpoint. But I think, the developers there'll be a need for developers, but I don't think there'll be as big of a need because you're going to have the current programmers that are here now over the next 20 years, they're going to, fade out and retire. If you're thinking about it, people that are just coming out of college that are programmers or have been doing it for a few more years, they'll either be the leaders when it comes to the code or they will be well sought after. Didn't I hear something a little while ago with regards to Cobalt or something where you still had applications in banks or somewhere that still ran on it, and there's only like a handful of them left because everything is shifted. I think I was reading something this morning where they're looking at the space program trying to land back on the moon, and all the intelligence, all the information relating to it, it's all on tape. We no longer have the ability to be able to read those machines, process the data. And so it's like we're having to start all over again, unless they've been effectively backed up or whatever else. And prior to that, they were relying on humans that were really good at math to do it. And then they got eliminated because computers came along. The way technology has advanced. And so I think this is another one of those areas where we're leaning more and more on the computers, and if, something happens where we no longer have the Claude code capability, 5 or 10 years from now, you're going to rely on the people that have that experience as a coder and bring them in to kind of provide that service. But I feel that we are in this evolution, that things are moving a lot faster than they've ever moved before. You could say the same thing 20 years ago. But with what we've seen with generative AI over the last 4 years, 3 to 4 years has just been exponential, and it's changing so much more, integrating more and more into cybersecurity, IT, our organizations. And it's a matter of being aware of it, understanding it. You don't have to use it, but you have to be aware of it, what impacts it can bring to your organization. And I'm talking now like at the board level or whatever, but when you've got people every day like that are driving trucks, they're going to be relying a lot more on AI because of all the technology that's in those trucks, the GPS and the supply chain, manifests and all that kind of stuff is all, being tracked electronically. If that all goes away, then, is it possible to be able to do all that work again manually?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you have that tribal knowledge, and you have those, the old graybeards, for to use the term.
Yep.
I'm working on the club, but you've got to have some of those people around when you see. I mean, Claude was just offline for however long
Yeah.
the other day,
Yep.
and anytime, and it's in some ways it's no different than the reliance on cloud infrastructure.
Right.
That's a concentration risk across industries. It doesn't matter who you are. I think that we're going to see, because the large foundation models they're a concentration risk because so much development is being done against them that if they go offline or they have a problem, then everybody that's relying on them is kind of dead in the water. If we've created all of these workflows and all these automations
These
around
dependencies.
AI,
Yeah.
and so that's the one thing that, well, I've now said that's the one thing I think 3 times, but there's those are the things that I'm concerned about with our rapid adoption of AI, and some of it feels like keeping up with the Joneses, so it's like, well, my competitor's doing it, so I have to do it.
Yeah. And then you have to
to-
work that now into your business continuity disaster recovery, your tabletop exercises.
Right.
It's one
Right.
thing. What if the cloud goes down? Okay, what if we lose ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini? Then
Right.
what do we, how do we restore that? Do we then switch over to something else? Do we wait? Do we,
Yeah, you've got to, you
get
almost
a
have
cup
to
of
develop
coffee?
against all of them, so
Yeah.
you've got some
Yeah.
redundancy there, but there's the APIs are all different, you're duplicating code and,
Right.
but, and I was talking to somebody the other day, and we see in transportation where, like track and trace and check calls and things like that are starting to be done with agentic AI, or AI powered chatbots. And again, if that's fleet facing communication, mission critical, and you lose that, are you set up to now all of a sudden revert back to doing it manually? And do people know how to do it effectively and understand what they're doing? So I think as we go into it, that's really what it comes down to, is not losing the ability to do long division or,
Right.
or do
Yeah.
math
I
in your
mean,
head. We need
if
some
you had
people
to do
around that
long
can do that.
division, if you had to do long division, could you do it? Yeah, it might take me a minute, but
Yeah, it's painful, but please don't
painful,
watch
yeah.
me.
Right. And it's kind of like cursive
Yeah.
writing, in the sense of how many people are doing cursive writing. It's kind of becoming a lost art kind of a thing.
But again, like you said, back to the 80s, nobody thought that everything was going to be online and we were going to be using cloud computing. And as those things came out and evolved, it feels different to me. I was young in the 80s, but I lived through the internet boom and the transition. And then, I was heavily involved in transitioning to the cloud in a couple of places. And this does feel different. This feels, because it's a transfer of knowledge, where previously it felt like new tools, right? And new skill sets. So, we'll see. I try to be in the optimistic camp, but there's definitely some yellow flags for me.
I was going to say, the optimists see the glass as half full and the pessimist sees the glass as half empty. But Excel, it sees it as January 2nd.
Yep.
There you go.
That's a good one. I'm going to keep that one. Well, I appreciate you coming on, James. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
And I told you the reason why it's called apparent security. Well, it's because I like to make cyber threats and cyber vulnerabilities apparent to organizations. But more importantly, a joke becomes a dad joke when it's apparent.
Yep. So that's in the introduction too. Dad
That'd
joke
be fun.
expert
Yep. That is-
extraordinaire.